On a frigid February evening in 1978, 5 men vanished into the night and into history. Known today as the Yuba County Five, their story is one of the most unsettling and haunting cold cases in California. It began with something so ordinary, a plan to watch a college basketball game in Chico, California. But what followed was anything but normal. The group, made up of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Ted Weiher, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias, was expected home that night. Their families waited anxiously for their return. But silence greeted them instead. No phone call, no sign of life, just absence. That silence would soon grow into a mystery that has baffled investigators, families, and armchair sleuths for over 4 decades. Each of the 5 men had a life of structure, familiarity, and routine. 4 of them, Madruga, Sterling, Weiher, and Hewitt, were considered to have mild intellectual disabilities. They were functional, independent in many ways, but relied heavily on daily structure and their family's guidance. Gary Mathias was the exception. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, he had a troubled past that included a discharge from the U.S. Army and several psychotic episodes. But by 1978, he was considered high-functioning and was reportedly stable on his medication. Despite their differences, the 5 shared a deep bond, a love of basketball, and a trusting friendship that made them nearly inseparable. The 24th of February, 1978, the men piled into Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego and made the hour-long drive to Chico to watch the UC Davis basketball team take on Chico State. They were in good spirits. The next day, they had a basketball game of their own. The team, known informally as the Gateway Gators, was scheduled to play in a special Olympic-sponsored tournament in Sacramento. They had laid out their uniforms the night before. They were excited. Each one of them spoke of the game as a highlight. The stakes felt high. Winning would earn them a free trip to Los Angeles. But they never came back. For days, their families and law enforcement searched desperately for any sign of them. It wasn't until 4 days later, on the 28th of February, that a park ranger discovered Madruga's car. It was in the Plumas National Forest, about 70 miles northeast of Chico, far off their expected route. The car was found on a rough gravel road, high in the mountains, where snow draped the land and temperatures fell well below freezing. The location itself made little sense. None of the men had a reason to be in that remote area. It was completely out of the way and unfamiliar. Yet there the car sat. It wasn't stuck in the snow. The tires had traction. The gas tank was a quarter full. The keys were gone, but the doors were unlocked. There was no visible damage, no signs of struggle. It looked as though it had simply been abandoned. For months, that was all anyone had. The car, a strange, quiet clue. With no signs of the men, theories ran rampant. Did they get lost? Were they chased? Did they choose to vanish? Search efforts were hindered by the heavy snowfall that blanketed the area. Helicopters and search parties combed the rugged terrain but came up empty. The families waited, tormented by uncertainty. Then, spring arrived, and with the melting snow came horrifying discoveries. In June 1978, a group of motorcyclists exploring the high country stumbled across a U.S. Forest Service trailer near a deserted campsite. It was roughly 19 miles from where the car had been found. Inside, they found the body of Ted Weiher. His corpse was lying on a bed, wrapped tightly in 8 sheets, strangely and meticulously tucked around him, almost as if someone else had done it. His beard suggested he had survived for nearly 2 months after their disappearance. His feet were severely frostbitten, nearly gangrenous. What puzzled investigators the most, however, was what surrounded him. A locker full of sealed sea rations, enough to last all 5 men for weeks. Dozens of matches, warm clothing, and even a propane tank that could have provided heat, all of it untouched. It was as though Ted had chosen not to survive, or had been unable to act. But why? Had he been alone? Or had someone been with him, trying in vain to help? Or worse, keeping him there? The discovery of Ted's body led to renewed search efforts in the area. Soon after, search teams uncovered the remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling. Their bodies were found 11 miles from the abandoned car, in opposite directions. One of them, badly decomposed, had been partially consumed by animals. The other lay as if he had collapsed mid-stride. Both men appeared to have died from exposure. Investigators were left with even more questions. Why had they left the car? And why walk so deep into a snow-covered forest without adequate clothing or supplies? Then came another discovery, this one more heartbreaking. 2 days later, the bones of Jack Hewitt were found, scattered across the forest floor 2 miles northeast of the trailer. Part of his skull and his shoes were found nearby. Like the others, there was no evidence of foul play. His remains had likely been there for months, exposed to the elements and wildlife. But one man remained missing, Gary Mathias. Of all the 5, he was the one investigators hoped to find alive. No body, no bones, just his shoes, found inside the trailer near where Weher had died. Mathias's disappearance added yet another layer of confusion to the case. If he had made it that far, why wasn't he in the trailer? If he'd left, where did he go? And why did no one ever find him? Despite exhaustive searches, interviews, and media attention, the case remained unsolved. The official ruling was death by natural causes, exposure to the elements. But that conclusion did little to satisfy the lingering unease surrounding the case. The behavior of the men defied logic. Why would 5 men with little survival experience abandon a working car and venture nearly 20 miles into treacherous terrain? And how did at least one of them survive for weeks, only to ignore every possible resource that could have helped him stay alive? Some believe the explanation is simple. The men got lost. They took a wrong turn, perhaps followed a map incorrectly, and when they realized their mistake, panic set in. But that theory doesn't explain the distance they traveled or why they kept going deeper into the wilderness instead of retracing their steps. Others speculate they were fleeing from something, a threat on the road, an encounter that frightened them into running. Could they have been chased, lured, or manipulated by someone they trusted? Then there's the theory involving Gary Mathias. As someone with a history of schizophrenia, some have suggested that he may have suffered a psychotic episode that night. If he believed they were in danger, he may have convinced the others to follow him. Could hallucinations or paranoia have driven him into the woods and taken the others with him? It's possible. But Mathias had been stable for months, taking his medication regularly. His family reported no recent signs of trouble. And even if he did have an episode, would the others have simply followed him without question? Adding to the enigma were odd witness accounts. Some people reported seeing the group at a gas station that night, accompanied by a woman and a baby. Others claimed to hear distant screams in the forest during the time of their disappearance. These details, though unconfirmed, fueled speculation. Were the men trying to help someone? Did they meet with foul play from unknown individuals? Or were these accounts simply coincidences, false memories shaped by the growing media frenzy? Ultimately, no single theory explains every aspect of the case. The Yuba County 5 may have been victims of a tragic chain of events: bad directions, cold weather, psychological stress, and poor decision-making. But the presence of unused supplies in the trailer, the distance they traveled, and the missing person who was never found leave open the possibility that something darker happened in those woods. Over 40 years later, the case remains frozen in time. Families still seek answers, the community still remembers, and the silence surrounding that night in 1978 still refuses to break. What really happened in the Plumas National Forest? Why did 5 men disappear into the snow, never to return? And what was it that drove them to leave behind the only safety they had? We may never know. But one thing remains certain. The story of the Yuba County Five is not just a mystery, it is a haunting echo of lives lost and questions left behind.